Everybody, we're going to start this Team Developer webinar now. Welcome again to this first Gupta Team Developer webinar again. I'm your host, Martin Tietz. I'm guiding you through this webinar today, and our speaker will be Helmut Reimann, an experienced Team Developer consultant. And we're going to talk about moving existing applications to .NET. First of all, I'd like to tell you how you can post questions to me and Helmut. You can either use the WebEx chat tool or the WebEx Q&A tool to post your questions. If we won't have time during the webinar, we will answer all those questions at the end of the webinar, of course. So please use the WebEx Q&A tool to post your questions. Today, let's move to the first slide here. We actually did we are doing a live webinar series on moving existing applications to .NET. In June, we did preparing existing applications for .NET, which Helmut presented. And this webinar is available on YouTube. The Gupta YouTube channel is youtube.com/Gupta Technologies. There you can see all past webinars and see all the things we did before on TD6.1, like web services and whatever you want to know. Today we are going to talk about moving existing applications to .NET. And with that, I really like to hand over to Helmut to start the technical part of this webinar. I'm changing presenters here, so hold on a second, please. Helmut, please go ahead.
Yeah. Many thanks, Martin. So hopefully you can see now my presentation.
Yep, it's coming.
Okay. So in June, we did the first part of this seminar series. So I got a lot of questions after the seminar because a lot of people have additional questions and asked me some more to tell something more about details and so on. So at this point, I want to do a small review of this last seminar because we had a little bit problems with our phone line and so on, so we recorded it the next day. But today we are live, hopefully to the end. And what I want to do is today, I want to have a short review of the last webinar, which was done in June. I want to talk about Team Developer.NET architecture. That means what's the difference between Win32 and .NET build targets. I want to talk again about the Upgrade Report because this is a very, very useful tool. And this tool gives you an overview of what should be done in your source code to get your application running on .NET. One very important point is the grid splitter implementation inside Team Developer 6.x, because now on .NET we have a special technology to display all the different child windows and so on. So the splitter technology for the table window is no longer in. So if you want to go to .NET, you have to do something different. Maybe you have to code a little bit, but it's a doable project at this point. I want to talk a little bit about the new charting control because this is a little bit different. Again, the old charting control is not able to run on .NET build targets, so we replaced it, and I want to give you a short overview about the new possibilities. And we have to talk about Xpac browser applications, build targets, and ActiveX because this is a little bit tricky to use on the browser environment. And I try to explain tonight what's really the difference between Xpac browser applications and how to use and how to replace ActiveX at this point. So then we have to talk about loose usage of variables. In .NET, it's not possible to, let's say, have special variables to use maybe arrays of handles in part or in case of numbers variables and so on. So you have to find out what's really the right variable at this point. We have some useful tools, so I want to introduce these useful tools like QuickTab to tab and tab to grid executables, which gives you the possibility to move very, very quick from the old technology to the new technology inside your source code. I have to talk about Report Builder in .NET because a lot of you guys are using reports inside Team Developer. They built on Report Builder, and you want to reuse them in .NET. We have some unsupported AP functions inside Team Developer for .NET. So I want to give you a brief overview of what's possible and what's now unsupported inside the .NET environment. And of course, we have to talk about performance of .NET applications in general. One point is the debugging of applications. If you're on the way to ship your applications, you want to start with debugging. And the main point for you is, the main questions every time if I visit a customer and if I do project, is moving to .NET time consuming, like what's the best project planning. So let's start with a short review of the last webinar. We learned a lot of things about the new binary data type. And this is very important to know because in .NET, if you pass, for example, variables, binary data types into .NET Framework classes, then you have to use the accurate binary data type. So we introduced the binary data type inside Team Developer that you can hold and deal with, like pictures, like documents, other objects. And if you want to pass them into the .NET Framework calls, then you have to, for example, you have to pass binary data inside this function calls. And for this, maybe you have to change your source code to use this binary data type. For you, it's pretty transparent because it's the same function calls if you want to display like a picture inside your application. If you want to do something with a binary data type, you can use the same function calls, the same API calls inside Team Developer. Our internal, we have a binary data type. So you can pass this variable, this, like a picture and so on, directly into a function call inside the .NET Framework. We have some unsupported Visual Toolchest and Quick Objects. So for this Quick Objects, maybe you have to replace something inside your source code. And maybe we have some unsupported Visual Toolchest inside our environment. Mostly it has nothing to do with we don't want to implement this in Team Developer. It's not supported in .NET. So later on you will see a screenshot and I want to explain the difference between Win32 deployments and .NET deployments. Also, there's no support for creating and calling of dynalibs. So if you're using dynalibs inside your applications, like dynamic linking inside during runtime and so on, you have to use a different technology. So it's not possible to use the old dynalibs built in Team Developer, let's say 3 or 4 inside Team Developer for .NET. And the main point is clean up Upgrade Report. And this is a very, very useful tool to create an upgrade report because it gives you an overview what must be done in your application to get it .NET ready. So let's start with the Team Developer .NET architecture. So Team Developer for .NET, a compiler creates a native MSIL executable which follows all rules of .NET usage. That means the compiler is the same and creates the same MSIL executable like other compilers, like in Visual Studio. There's no difference between the old, let's say, Microsoft compilers and the Team Developer new compiler for .NET. There are no dependencies to Team Developer Win32 deployment. So last time I told you if something happened, if something changed inside the operating system, if you get new features and so on, then we are responsible to create a new deployment, and this deployment holds the feature of the Team Developer. And when in .NET it's a little bit different. So we have to follow up the .NET Common Language Runtime, CLR, and we are based on the .NET Framework. So if something is not supported from the framework, like special Windows handles and so on, there's no chance to implement them because it's not implemented inside the framework. It's very important to know we are bound now on the .NET Framework. So if something is not supported from the framework, we are in big trouble. Additionally, we ship a few assemblies based on the .NET language, like C# or Visual Basic .NET, which provides us our business logic inside Team Developer. So if you load your source code inside Team Developer, you have only maybe one file, maybe some APL files, and so on. So the structure of Team Developer is always the same. So if you want to compile to Win32, it's the same as the source code file is the same as for .NET. But internally, we create a temporary directory, and this temporary directory holds a structure of a Visual Studio project, or like a Visual Studio project. So we have project files, we have resource files, we have license keys, we have intermediate language files, we have binary directories, and one directory is called XAML. Inside XAML directory, inside the temporary directory, you will see the definition of all your dialogues and forms and so on, like MDI windows. So it's based on XAML. This is a normal Microsoft technology based on the Microsoft presentation foundation, and we use the XAML files to get all the information out of the dialogue, out of the design time, to display this during runtime. So you can, for example, edit this XAML files inside the XAML editor and the ship1 XAML editor, maybe to change colors, to change some fonts and so on. But again, if you think about it, you will see that maybe you have third-party tools like board tools from the internet and so on with special environments. Then make sure that these tools can support XAML. If not, this, for example, dialog box or the special calendar control is not able to create XAML. At this point, it will not be displayed, and you get an error, compiler error, because the compiler bounds all these files, project files, resource files, and so on, into one executable. So it's really a standard technology. It's nothing special from Team Developer, and this is really what happens all the days if you are dealing with Visual Studio, for example. But we do it only temporary. That means if you create a new project, if you recompile something, if you load again your sources, we create again this temporary directory for you. If you change something in the XAML file and so on, we take care about it, and maybe you can use it to support different languages by creating different XAML files for different languages, like for a dialogue in English, in Italian language, or in German language. So we have the possibilities inside Team Developer to load different resources during runtime. For example, for English, German, or other language environments. Also, we have a special tool inside Team Developer for .NET to create MSIL executables. That means to create an installer. So it's a little bit different. In Win32, you have to install, for example, the deployment for the Team Developer environment. With Team Developer for .NET, you have to create an installer, an MSIL installer. And this installer creates an MSI file, installer package. And inside the installer package, we bind everything what's needed to run your application. That means resource files, for example, special Team Developer runtime files. So these are only maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, depends if you use report builder, if you use special technologies inside Team Developer. These are .NET assemblies. It's not really a deployment, it's only additional or add-ons to the .NET framework to run Team Developer environments inside the .NET framework, to give the possibility for the framework to use special features like the datetime functions inside Team Developer and so on. The next step is to run Upgrade Report. This is very important and a very useful tool. The Upgrade Report gives you the possibility to get an overview what's really needed to do to change in your source code files. So if you compile the first time to .NET, you will be asked to run this Upgrade Report. And it's a good point to run this Upgrade Report because maybe you get a lot of information inside the report, what must be changed inside the report. And we generate at this point an upgrade report.text in the environment of the application, and you get information like what's supported, what's not supported, maybe usage of variables, And in the list on the screen, you can see, for example, we have a library name. This is a graphic library.60.dll, which should be implemented directly by an APL, not directly. So we use, for example, a special APL to deal with this wrapper. Also, maybe you get a list what's not supported, like the two calls in the end of this report, because in TD6, for example, we had a problem with algorithm set header and set footer, so it was not supported. And you can use tasks inside Team Developer to mark these lines, and you can find them again inside a to-do list, what must be done to get your application running on Team Developer for .NET. After you can run this upgrade report from time to time, we have a menu entry inside Team Developer IDE, and this makes sense if you want to go to .NET, if you're working on this environment, to look into the report from time to time to find out if you're working on a special environment and on a special, let's say, feature of your application. Then it makes sense to bring this upgrade report to 0 for this environment. So after you're dealing with all your issues inside the report, then maybe you get, after a time, no issues found to report. At this point, you can first time compile your application, your source code to .NET. So this must be done. If not, you get every time a compiler error, like it's not allowed, like you have special keywords used inside your sources and so on. So the upgrade report gives you, before you compile, information about what must be changed inside your source code. This is a screenshot about the stamps inside your source code by using task. So if you find, for example, a special unsupported function, you can find them very easily inside your source code, and you can create with the right mouse click a task out of it. So you create a stamp inside your source code with a timestamp and a date value, and you can type in some more information like this file function is not supported in TD, whatever, and we comment out this line at this point. Or you can only use a command to say, I want to work on this later on. I don't want to comment this line out. So if you use in the menu Find Tasks, then you will get a list of all tasks which are inserted inside your source code. If you do a double click on the line, on the row of this output, then you will be placed directly into the task, into the needed source code, and you can start working on this. Now we have something very special inside Team Developer. In the past, we had the table window, and we had a splitter technology inside the table window. That means, for example, the last 3 or 4 or 5 rows of this table window can be used as a splitter. It's no longer possible because the table window is not able to create XAML. So we had to replace the table technology with a new grid control. And the grid control is a one-to-one replacement for all the table windows. And you have to use the grid inside your source code. That means, for example, if you're using table windows, then you have to use a table to grid conversion tool to replace the table windows to the grid. So the API is really the same, but you get additional API calls. On the left-hand side, you see, for example, the new splitter technology. This is done with 2 table windows, and we implemented new features inside the table and inside the columns. For example, to have only one column or one row at the end. That means, for example, to have a summary bar inside a table window, because most of the tables are used, or of the splitters are used to display some summary information, like a total, like an average, a min-max value, or whatever. But also we have the possibilities to explain or to change attributes for a table window to enable a summary bar and hide a column header. So in the second table, at the end of this screenshot, you can see, for example, that we have several rows, and we don't have a table header at this point. Well, we have a summary bar. Also, we have some API calls with this API calls, you can hide and display the summary bar, and you can change values, you can change the labels of it, and so on. But first of all, I want to show a small application and how it was developed at this point. So, for example, we have this grid number 2. This grid number 2, if we look back into the layout, you will see this is one grid and this is one grid. Maybe you have to code something if you're because maybe in the past you have directly combinations like this row and this row is a summary in this line and so on. So you have to change it at this point. There's no way around. But if you look into the property settings, at this point, this table window has no column headers. So if I switch them on, I have column headers, and I can switch them off. Also, I have the possibility to show and to hide the summary bar. And if I do a fill, let's have first a look into the columns. So at this point, every column has, for example, a column aggregate type. So you can define by default total, minimum, maximum, average, and so on. It depends on the cell type. So, and the data type, it doesn't make sense to have a summary of, for example, date values. At this point, you have only min, max values or an average. And if you run this application, then you will see this is a .NET application. We are running now the application for Team Developer and the compiler for .NET for Team Developer. And it takes a little bit of time. And later on, I'll try to explain why it takes a little bit of time to run applications in .NET. And you will see we have now the first table is a normal tile table populate, and we have all the sums for maybe for the department CSS and FEN and so on, and we have the total. So at this point, this is a splitter or a dual splitter technology because we can hide something, and we have the total value of all this of the column of this the volume of this column. So it's really a little bit different, but it's the only way to support this information for now inside Team Developer. Let's go back to my presentation. Sorry. Here we go. So, new grid API, what does it mean? We have some API functions to hide and show the summary bar of a grid. So you can decide, I want to show it, I want to hide it, because maybe it needs a little bit space to be displayed, and you want to show it only if the customer wants to see something in the background. Then you can set up the column label. You can set, for example, a special aggregate type, like call at user. This is user defined, or you can set aggregate type sum, maximum, minimum, and so on. So we have some constant values. Also, you can display a special own calculate value inside this summary bar. And sometimes it makes sense to do a summary bar refresh, maybe because someone added some values inside a special cell. Then it makes sense after saving something to do a cell grid summary bar refresh. And some other summary bar API calls. The charting server is something that must be replaced because, first of all, bit per second no longer exists. So we had to replace this charting control because, first of all, the old charting control doesn't support Unicode, and everything inside .NET framework, everything inside Team Developer is now Unicode based. So we had a lot of problems to display the data. So at this point, you can only use only the local code page and so on. Now with the replacement, the problems are gone, and you can run and compile without any change your old applications. So we'll see if you have charts inside, business charts inside your application. You will see a new design. It looks much more modern, but all the properties are read from the existing chart control of the settings of inside the source code. But you have a modern look and feel. You have a lot of additional possibilities. So maybe later on end of the year or maybe in autumn, I can do a presentation directly only for the charting control, because we have a lot of new features inside the charting control. So you can see new chart types like the balloons, like different epsilon axes in the same time with different scalings and so on. You have the possibilities to show splines, 3D charts. You can export them directly to Excel, JPEG, BMP, and what you want to do. And you can zoom into the chart controls. And also, for example, you can use multi-charts inside the multi-chart container. This is very tricky, because then you have the possibility to show, for example, 2 or 3 different charts with the same x-axis and different y-axis in one chart. And the good thing is, the old and new API can be mixed. For example, this is a multi-chart sample in a hard copy. At this point, you can see that we have 2 charts inside one chart container. And we share the x-axis, and we can use zooming. And if you scroll maybe in chart number 1, the second chart and the third and the fourth chart will also be scrolled and zoomed. So this is really dependent for each chart. And also we have different y-axis and different chart types. So in this case, we have only line charts, and we can mark some special points because it's below something or higher than a special value. Also, we can create some colored areas, like this is green, and we have red areas inside and the chart and so on. And this is a screenshot of the new chart API calls. So it's pretty simple to use. It's much easier because you can directly pass some data arrays into the chart control without using tables and without using different tables and technologies in the background. So this is very easy to use, and you can replace easily quick table and quick graph inside your application, because you can directly use arrays of different data types and so on. This is a screenshot or 2 screenshots with one time only with different y-axis on the right bottom, and on the top, on the left-hand side, you can see, for example, shared container with different chart controls with different ways to display like a spline with different y-axis and maybe a bar control, a bar container, and so on. And you can scroll through them, and you can dig really into the chart control by using zoom functions. ActiveX depends now on the .NET build target. So you can reuse ActiveX controls for .NET desktop application. So there's no change of code needed. So it was a little bit, or some questions, I got some questions in the past, what's about our ActiveX controls? We want to ship only desktop applications. So that is pretty simple to realize, because you have only to create a new wrapper API. So if you have an ActiveX control, do a copy and paste on an empty dialog and so on, and team developer creates a new wrapper API based on Unicode. That's it at this point. So the API is used as a wrapper, and all the data is passed now as the Unicode data into the or from the ActiveX control. For Xpub browser applications, so if you plan to move your applications to the browser, then maybe it makes sense to replace ActiveX controls with WPF controls. There are hundreds of WPF controls, or thousands of WPF controls in the market, and you can use them very easily. So we provide an API to set all the properties to get response from special messages. You can react on special messages and so on. Also, you can fire methods from the API, from the WPF control. So everything is supported to deal with us. One point is, if you want to use ActiveX control, later on I want to explain how this Xpub browser application works. So it's really downloaded into the browser, and there's nothing installed on the browser side. That means on the client side. And if you want to use ActiveX, then ActiveX control must be installed and registered on the client machine. And sometimes it's not possible. Maybe you are in a coffee shop and you want to use the internet shop or whatever, and you want to use a third-party machine, like from a colleague or someone else, to look into the internet to start the application, maybe to work with your application. Then you have to unload the ActiveX control, and you have to install the X control on the client machine. And this is not possible, mostly not possible, and not allowed on a third-party machine. If it's your own, maybe it's fine, but not really on on a third-party machine. For example, if you are in a special cafe or whatever. And all those things, the next job is what you have to think about if you want to use XBAP applications and if you want to use WPF controls. It's not possible to compile them into the Win32 environment. So if you're using ActiveX controls, then everything is fine. So if you're working with, for example, .NET desktop applications, and for some reason you want to use Win32, then you have only to change the compiler setting to Win32, and you can compile again to Win32. But if you're using WPF controls, then you're bound on .NET desktop or on WPF browser applications. So it's not possible at this point to go back to Win32. So XBAP architecture. The application is installed on IIS, and you need a certificate and so on to run this application inside the browser. The browser itself downloads the whole application and stores executable inside the browser cache. So the issue is at this point, if you want to change something in your application, then you have to change the file version inside the application settings, inside the browser, not in the browser, in the application settings inside the build target environment, because the browser looks into the executable, and if there is a new version of the file inside the browser or inside IIS, the browser will download this file. If not, the browser will directly start the executable inside the browser from the browser cache. So the executable runs on a local machine inside the browser. There's nothing installed on the client side, excepting the .NET framework. So the .NET framework must be installed on the client machine. So at this point, it's not possible to use, for example, Linux, because on Linux there's no .NET framework, because our application now, the .NET executable, needs the browser and really the .NET framework installed on the client side. At this point, you have only the data traffic over the network. So first of all, you have to download the executable, maybe 20, 30 megabytes of your application, of the executable, into your browser. But if this is one time in the browser cache and there's no change of the file version, then there's only the data traffic over the network. And you can use our reusable M-pipe inside the IIS to use a reusable connectivity to the database. So again, the browser checks the version number of the executable for the new download. Some restriction: no loose usage of numeric types, SQL handles, window handles, file handles, and so on. So they must be used as they are defined. So if you define a file handle, you can use them only as a file handle. If you have an SQL handle, it's only you have to use them as an SQL handle. So in the past, we found a few applications. For example, they have SQL handles, and maybe later on they use it as a file handle, they use it as a window handle, and so on. It's really very dirty, but it works very well in Win32. And the same for numeric variables. So you have to have clean applications and clean data types, and you have to use the right data type. So the next is if you pass data into the framework or into web servers and so on, then you have to pass the right data type. If you are really have dirty data types inside your application, it will fail. Also, we don't support DDE no longer. It's not really our issue because it was cut from Microsoft, and the .NET Framework doesn't support DDE. So if you are using .NET, the DDE inside your application, and you want to run to .NET, then you have to replace the technology inside your application. And only a small subset of low-level window messages, WM messages, are supported. Again, if you're running like Windows API calls, I mentioned during the session before that it is possible to use the .NET Framework inside Win32 applications. So you can replace Win API calls by using the .NET Framework calls, because you want to run natively for .NET, and you don't want to have only parts on .NET, parts on Win API calls, and parts maybe on DLLs and so on. So at this point, it makes sense to have everything in .NET because you want to run on managed .NET code. By the way, you get a list on all supported and not supported messages and with a visual Toolchest information on our web page at QuickTabs.com. So quick objects are not supported on .NET. You have to replace them. Quick graphs are supported on .NET, excepting if you fill this quick graph with quick tables and so on. At this point, you have to do something like moving this away from quick tables to, let's say, arrays, and pass this array directly into the charting control. QuickTabs can be converted to the new tab control by using QuickTab to tab tool, and quick reports are not supported on .NET. QuickTab to tab access is a nice tool, and before you run this tool, it makes sense to make really a backup of all your code, because we replace with this tool the pages.apl and QuickTab.apl with the new QuickTab to tab APL. So the calls are the same, but we replace the wrapper to use the new tab control. QuickTab to tab APL declares following classes: the tab bar class, ctab control, the general window class, ctab control parent, and the ctabx class for dialogs, boxes, and form windows. So this tool replaces really the old technology with the new technology, but it does everything on the one fly. So it's not possible to say I want to start first with this part of the application, then with the second part, because it's really a global replacement of the APL calls and the APL wrappers at this point. It's a little bit different to the table to grid replacement tool, because you can decide what really you replace and so on. But again, if you want to run on .NET build targets, you have to replace the table window, because the table window doesn't support the .NET at this point. So here's a list of supported standalone functions from Visual Toolchest. So you get this list in our white papers, and you get a lot of information on our web page. What is supported, what's no longer not supported, why it's not supported, and so on. I don't want to go through this list because maybe you don't use them, maybe you do use them only in parts and so on, and maybe it's nothing inside the list was not really supported for you. So you can find the complete list on this link. Also, it's not all this old link to unify.com. You have to change it to QuickTabs.com. I'm sorry. Some restrictions. There's no support for creating or calling dynalibs. I mentioned it before. So you have to compile your existing dynalibs to the .NET assembly libraries. So this is a part of the compiler inside Team Developer, and you can change the build settings from the dynalib.dll setting to the .NET assembly setting, and we create a native .NET DLL which can be used directly inside the Team Developer source code. So you have to replace this technology at this point. And maybe you run into issues because you are using names which collide with reserved words in the intermediate language of .NET framework. That means if you have special keywords, maybe you have to replace them and use different keywords inside Team Developer because they are reserved inside the intermediate language. Then you get a compiler error at this point. Report Builder. You can use your Report Builder reports inside your .NET application. So there's no change. So if you're using the messaging, parsing variables and data inside the reports, if you start them directly from the application, there's no difference. There's the same messaging inside the report technology. So like before page header, before detail, and so on, what was used in the past can be directly used for the new .NET environment. Also, running both environments as a desktop executable, like normal as defined in Win32, and also you can use the browser Xtab executable. So at this point, you have to create and you have to deploy the report DLLs, the framework DLLs for Report Builder into the IIS environment. But you will be asked during the deployment of this IIS application to use the browser and the report environment inside IIS. So then we copy all the needed files into the IIS environment. But one very important point is the report itself, the report source file must be the same version of the report builder as Team Developer. So I heard a lot of, our reports are based on maybe on Team Developer 3.2 or 4.2, and we use them inside Team Developer 6 or 6.1 without any change. Well, maybe it works, but there's no guarantee because, again, in Team Developer now everything is in Unicode, and you pass Unicode data to an UNZ report, and maybe you will not see all the data in a correct way, and it's very, very dangerous. So please open your report in Report Builder 6.x, save this report, and the job is done at this point. So for debugging, we have the same features as in Win32. So if you're working with Team Developer for .NET and you can compile with intermediate language compiler and so on, and you create breakpoints and you want to see all the arrays, the values inside the arrays and so on. So this, there's no change between Win32 and the .NET environment. But for .NET build targets, we use the Microsoft .NET debugger in the background. So this is really based on the .NET stuff, on the .NET structure. That means we step through the XAML files, we step through resource files, and so on. And that's why we have, was one reason why we have the temporary Visual Studio structure, how to deal with projects. The performance of the .NET. So this is really a little bit dangerous to explain because you will maybe say .NET Team Developers of applications are very slow. That's not the truth. The startup time, of .NET applications takes time. Why? First of all, it is just-in-time compiler. The executable itself, it's not really the end product of the compiler. So if you start executable, the just-in-time compiler creates machine code from MSIL executable, depending on your computer hardware, maybe on the processor type, on the operating system, installed framework, and so on. So if you click on executable with a double click and you start your application, it takes time to compile the application with a just-in-time compiler. And this is the same for Office products. So if you, for example, start Word or if you start Excel or other Microsoft products, it takes time. And mostly you get a splash screen. It's loading, doing something, and so on. And you have to wait for the application. And it's the same. It's really the same what we are doing because we are now bound on the .NET framework, on the .NET executable, MSIL executable. And you have to start your application, and we have to start, the application must be compiled with a just-in-time compiler, and it must load all the framework stuff which is needed to run the application. And sometimes the application loads modules which are no longer used before. For example, I found out application is running very well, and after a while I want to see charts inside my application. I start a dialog to display a chart, and at this point we have to load the framework part for this chart into the memory. And this is the same for Microsoft Office products. So sometimes if my computer is busy and I want to change, for example, a font inside a cell inside an Excel sheet, then it takes time to get the dialog. This is the same, because at this point Microsoft Office has to load this part of the framework. And this is a heavy usage of .NET Framework, and it's very memory consuming to run applications in the framework. Not only for team developer, it's the same for Microsoft products. And depending on applications, the performance is better than in Win32. So if the application is started and so on, so I get very, very good values for the performance in .NET compared to Win32. But again, it depends on the application. If the application is very bad, has very bad implementations of how to use database connectivity and how to use maybe third-party tools and so on, then the performance is really every time a problem. And again, some tips: if you're running your first applications on .NET Framework, then it's a good point to start with testing and really testing everything inside your application. You have to use the debugger to find out what maybe is not filled because the variable is in the wrong context, and the application reacts sometimes a little bit different, really sometimes, because the context of a special variable is not really there, because maybe the dialog of the form is not really in the memory. So in our Win32 environment, so if you want to use a special variable from a special dialog, we take care about maybe the variable is not inside the memory, so we can wait because the dialog must be started or must be transferred, or we don't need to full qualified parse. But in .NET, you have to do this. And it must be full qualified, and sometimes maybe the variable is empty, it's defined but it's empty because at this point the dialog has no access to the special environment of the memory. So at this point, maybe you have to find out where the variable is declared and where it is filled and so on. Maybe you have to move it into a higher level to have it over the whole application. And again, we don't use a special team developer deployment. We need only a few .NET assemblies from team developer to support the business objects inside a team developer for date time values, like our special table and grid features, which are not really inside the .NET framework. That's, for one sample, child table populate. So some child table populate is one of these business objects and is built inside with native C# code, but is not inside the .NET framework. So at this point, you need this DLL and this framework, or addition to this framework, to support child table populate inside your application. And .NET doesn't like it if dependent files are not in the same directory, like icon files, resources, and so on. So they want to have mostly everything in one directory, excepting some assemblies because they are registered in the global assembly cache. And you have to think about APDs. At this point, you have to compile them into .NET assemblies. I mentioned it before. Is it possible to replace Win API calls with .NET Framework function? This is a good point to start with, because you can use already .NET Framework and .NET assemblies inside Win32 applications, like in team developer applications. So you can start replacing Win API calls in Win32 build time. So this is a good point. And you can remember your reports. Often my application doesn't work, after a while it crashes if I open a report and so on. Please look at this environment, look into the reports, and again, if you want to run your application inside the browser, you have to deploy the reports and the report builder assemblies into the IIS. Well, a very good point is at this point is don't do several steps at the same time. So I saw some applications, very old source code, and they migrated the application, the old source code from, let's say, Team Developer 2 or 1.15 and so on, or older versions of Team Developer, into the latest version of Team Developer, like Team Developer 6.1, including modernization of the applications, like replacing the tab, replacing tree controls and other things, and have a totally different user interface. And they want to have, in the same way, the .NET build target, and including browser and web service, in one fly. And at this point, well, this is not a good idea, because you have to do several steps in one time. Like, you have to take care about Unicode. You have to take care about modernization. You have to take care about .NET differences between Win32 and .NET build targets. And maybe you want to use web services and so on. There's a lot of things to do. And the first step to bring applications from ANSI to Unicode is not really a big deal. It's like, for the moment, it's like migrating from Team Developer 3 whatever to 4.2. Load, and the job is done by our migration tools. And you have to take care about Unicode and third-party tools around Unicode. But if you have problems with, again, with Win32 applications, maybe you run into issues inside your application, maybe some is not correct with our inside our API calls, then it will not be better if you run on .NET. So you have to clean first application. The application should run in Win32 mode without any problems. Then you can start going for .NET. So the better way is to migrate first from Win32 to 6.1. Run from time to time the upgrade report to get a feeling what must be changed. If you're working on Win32 code, then maybe it's a small way to change something to get it to shrink down the upgrade report list. So bring the report step by step to 0 and test your application. Do the modernization of the application. And again, run from time to time the .NET upgrade report. Maybe you have to change something in your coding rules because you did this in the past every time in this way, but it's no longer allowed for .NET. So again, it's not to force our people to do something different or customer to do something different inside the source code. It's only because .NET doesn't support it, and you have to code a little bit different for .NET. And again, you have to replace the Windows API with .NET Framework functions. You can stay with Windows API calls, but then the application is not native on .NET Framework. So it makes sense to start really to plan a .NET project. That means plan time and money. So yeah, it's more marketing trick, and to say, okay, you have to spend a little bit money and you get a compiler for .NET, load your application and compile your application for .NET, and everything is fine. Well, again, the difference between Win32 and the .NET build target is not really high, but there are differences, and you have to take care about the differences because you have to follow the Microsoft rules. And you know from Microsoft.NET environments like Visual Studio, if they bring out a new version of Visual Studio, you have to do a lot of things inside your source code. And in Team Developer, you have to do only some limited things to get your applications running on .NET Framework. Please remember, if you're using WPF controls, you can no longer run your application in Win32 mode. And I was often asked, Hammer, please give me some numbers. I have maybe 1 million lines of source code. How long does it take to bring my application to .NET? I don't know. So there's no rule like 1 million lines of code need 4 weeks to migrate. It is more dependent on the quality of the code. So if you have functional classes, if you have a really clean structure, if you're using really the right variables at the right time, if you're using binary variables, and if you have very clean source code, then you have your source code in a very, very short time running on Team Developer 6.1 for Win32. And you can start with a project to get it to .NET. And it depends on the complexity complexity on the source code. So if you have a lot of dependencies inside, if you're using a lot of ActiveX controls, a lot of third-party tools and so on, then it makes a little bit hard. And one very, very interesting point is third-party tools. If you're using building blocks, well, this is very, very hard to bring into .NET. The same for Xstyle. So if you have third-party inside and it's not supported in any .NET assembly, then maybe this application is not able to run on .NET. But a good indicator is the .NET Upgrade Report. So you can run and you can use Upgrade Report and you get a feeling what must be done to get your application running on .NET. So again, we have the possibility to look into the guptatechnologies.com webpage to get more information. So we have a lot of white papers and samples of applications who run on Win32 and on .NET, how to use WPF controls inside the application. And it's a good point to look into this environment, also to follow our webinars and to look on Facebook, not on Facebook, on YouTube, to load these webinars, again, to look into these webinars, and to visit us on our developer conference around the world. That's from my side for the point. I want to show, before I want to exit, I want to show small application running on a browser, for example. So I refresh my libraries, and I want to show now the build settings. For this, I want to run this application inside a browser application. So I have a few dialogues inside and a few classes and so on. Now I start my debug mode for my application. I set my changes. At this point, I can compile my application with the intermediate language compiler. Now it takes a little bit of time because I load this application inside my browser. And at this point, I don't have a certificate for this, so my browser asks me, is it allowed to run this application? Yes, I will do this. And you can see, hopefully, it takes a few seconds because now I have a just-in-time compiler and so on. And my application is now running inside the browser. So I can use this application, I can use all these features inside of my application to get contacts and invoices and so on. So my application is now a native .NET application running inside the browser. And now I want to stop it. And hopefully I want to change my desktop into a desktop application, my build target. And now I compile it, and hopefully I can run my application now in a normal desktop mode. So it's one source code, and also I can change the build target back to Win32 because I never used WPF control inside this application. Again, I have to use it, and you can see it takes a few seconds, but my application is running and just in time compiled as a desktop application. So that's from my side.
Thank you very much, Helmut. That is very interesting. So please, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A tool. And in the meantime, I'd like to again mention our developers conferences this year. We are actually going to show how to migrate a Unify product that has been written with Team Developer. And we're going to show you how you get that onto .NET. First, move to Unicode 6.1, do all the Win32 work, and then move that application to .NET. And actually, we are talking about Team Object Manager. So we are using a pretty huge real-life application, a real product that we want to move to .NET. And that will be demonstrated at all the DevCons worldwide. Please go to our new website, guptatechnologies.com, to see where you want to attend your the DevCons. So let me just switch on this here again. For the moment, I don't see any questions. from tomorrow on, this webinar will be available on our website and on YouTube. So if you have colleagues that missed this webinar today, have them watch at or look at our website tomorrow at around lunchtime in Europe. Then this will be up for viewing on YouTube, on our new YouTube channel, YouTube/Gupta Technologies. So, where are my controls here? Chat. Oh, here's a question. How many application processes in the application pool web servers can run on? That is a pretty detailed .NET application. Helmut, do you have any idea of?
Can you please repeat this question?
How many application processes can run in the application pool of a web server? But I think really, I think we are not using any application pools of the web server with the XPAP applications at least. Those are applications that are being downloaded to the client and executed on the client.
Right, because the IIS, the application pool, is only, let's say, the environment of this. This is only one time installed for each application. So the application itself is downloaded into the browser. So at this point, if you have maybe 10 or 20 or 30 applications, browsers, which are connected to this IIS application, then only one time the environment is loaded. And we reuse the routers and so on. So you have only one connection to the database. So there's my eyes no limit for the IIS application pool.
That would be actually more a question for web services, how you use that. But it's, we are using all the .NET scalability technology, so that shouldn't really be an issue to scale either web services or the DB pipe technology that allows to run the XPAP applications without a database client. So I think there are no more questions. Thank you again, Helmut, for this very good webinar. And as I said, from tomorrow on, this can be viewed on YouTube, and I hope I see all of you soon in our next webinar next month. Thanks again, and goodbye.
Bye.